Welcome into Bucs Insider, coming to you from the Bucs studio, presented by Ticketmaster. Casey Phillips here with Scott Smith and Bri Dix, and we have even more to talk about coming out of that free agency frenzy. And I'm sure things might still be happening. You never really know. And but we got a chance to, of course, we talked about some of those moves last week, but now we got to have press conferences from a few of those guys, which is exciting. We're going to have even more of that moving in the future days here. But I wanted to go ahead and start with Haason Reddick because he's kind of our one big splashier new free agent signing, new addition to the team, and we wanted to help fans get a chance to know him a little bit better. So let's take a listen to this clip of what made him want to join us here in Tampa Bay.
Just the fit. After talking to footy, after talking to Coach Bulls, you know, their vision for how they plan to use me here, that was very intriguing, something that I knew I needed. Outside of that, you know, I felt like this was a team that was a couple short pieces away. I felt like that I could come, bring my knowledge, bring my abilities, blend it with the guys that's already here. You got great pieces, you know, you got Vida, you got young guy, Yaya. So just knowing that I could come here, help out, I thought it'd be fun.
I loved hearing from him in his presser. For one thing, the guy knows how to do a press conference and how to endear himself to fans. He even used the word crew already multiple times.
I heard that.
This guy knows what he's doing already. So outside of his skills at a press conference, what are some of the things that we're excited about with him coming in and maybe even learned from him at his press conference?
I liked that he, in the draw to coming here, was talking about the vision that Todd Bowles and both Larry Foote have for him, but also just, he said he felt like this was a team last year that we're just a few pieces away. And he said, you know, he can bring his knowledge, which he feels like separates him as a pass rusher, staying one step ahead in the trenches, but also just wanting to join a guy like Vita Vea, joining Yaya Diaby, and what the capability and the potential of this team can be in 2025.
You know, it reminds me a little bit, and I'm not trying to make a straight comparison, but the Simeon Rice edition back in 2001, at that time, Monty Kiffin told him he would be the final piece to the puzzle to what would be a great defense, because they needed a really good outside edge presence to pair with Warren Sapp in the middle, who was dominant. I'm not saying Haason Reddick is Simeon Rice. I'm not saying he's not. I don't want to paint it either way, but I feel like he used the phrase piece of the puzzle, I think, and it made me think, we have dominant inside guys now. Our two leading sack guys last year were Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. So not in that order, right? Kalijah was number one?
Kalijah was number one,
I don't want to, I know they're
battling it,
you don't want to give him
the
this
wrong
press.
person,
So, you know, if he could provide that, it's kind of a similar situation, and he recognizes that. And I think also there was the connections that helped out. I mean, first of all, I played at Temple, so
this
Todd
is
Bowles
quite a Temple staff we have here.
And then, you know, he played at Arizona when Todd Bowles and others were there. Larry Foote was there. Larry Foote was his coach, his position coach, when he was playing off-ball linebacker there. And now because Larry just switched again here for us to outside linebackers, he's going to be his position coach again. I think he has a real affection for him.
Yeah, I thought the timing of that was so interesting that Coach Foote did just shift, and now here we get this guy that he gets to shift with him. And how cool to think that, man, what if Coach Foote hadn't made that move? Does Haason Reddick still want to come here? We'll never really know. But, man, after the press conference, I got to talk to Haason for a little bit, and we were discussing how he just loves Coach Foote. Like, he just thinks so highly of him, as we all do here, love him so much. So I think what a perfect pairing of this guy who brings a bit of that veteran presence, especially to a room that still has Yaya, that's a little younger, Chris Braswell. You're hoping to maybe take a step to have that veteran guy in the room to really kind of show them what to do, I think is really going to be great. We also had Levonte David's presser. So not the, I
never heard of him.
Never heard of this guy. He's not quite the new addition like Haason Reddick is, but boy, are we excited we still have him. And of course, his presser was just lovely, and so many great sentiments shared about the organization and about him. So take a listen.
I think it's incredible, man. I think I don't know if it's talked about enough. You know what I'm saying? These guys being loyal to their guys. You know what I'm saying? Not an organization aren't like that. And for those guys to be transparent with us and have that, you know, back and forth communication about how important they feel we are to them and how much we want to be back and play for the city, you know, I think that's incredible. You know, it's a test of, you know, from the ownership all the way down, you know, they want their guys and they believe in their guys and they're going to stick with us, you know what I'm saying? So, and I think for the young guys to see that gives them even more motivation. You know what I'm saying? They could ask guys like me, Chris, Mike, for advice and things like that. So, you know, when those guys see that, you know, I think they get even more motivated. They want to play for this organization, an organization like that. And the thing just becomes a mutual respect thing, you know what I'm saying? So.
Well, of course, Levonte's the guy that we build the draft after, essentially, now that they've talked about that, of the I am that man strategy, and that it's Lavonte, that we just want more Levontes in here, so thank goodness we still have that one in the room. But what did you take away from his press conference and some of the things that you noticed about his excitement to be back, and what even made him make this decision?
What really stood out to me was him talking about the mutual respect that the team has, but in the front office, and then the players, and how you have a guy like Levonte that's going into his 14th season with the same team, which is nearly unheard of in the NFL. But then also you have a guy like Mike Evans that just finished up his 11th season. And for young players to see those players, this team, stick with the guys and pay them, but also the respect. And even he said that a lot of times you don't have that open line of communication with the general manager, but he said that's something that they have with Jason Light, and that goes from the culture that is instigated here from ownership down, and how a lot of young guys, when you see a guy like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Levonte David that are still here, that makes them become more motivated and want to play for an organization that treats their players right and pays their own and sticks with the players that they have.
Yeah. Definitely established that kind of culture over recent years.
That's great. I mean, I think it's a great sign for recruiting new free agents, or even just the culture you're building for these rookies that are coming in, that when players are, and we don't know exactly what all the options were for guys like Mike and Chris and Levonte out there, but it seems safe to say that at least for a few of them, if not all of them, they might have been able to get more money elsewhere.
Right.
And that choice to stay here says so much about the organization, their hopes for how successful the team could be, the culture we built, and I think that's a really great thing.
Yeah, I liked hearing Levonte talk about his process, because think about this. This is the third straight year he's signed a one-year contract, which is, and before that it was just a 2-year deal, which is the sign of a guy who at the end of each season is reevaluating whether he wants to keep going or not. And what Levonte had to ask himself, two things that were big were, do I still love playing football? And do I trust myself to continue playing at the standard I've set? And he had to mull that over, and I guess he came up with yes in both, and I believe he's probably correct.
Yeah, I agree with that, and how exciting to know that the answer is still yes for both of those things. All right, so let's talk about a few more of the signings that have happened, and these may not have been quite as splashy as some of those guys, but could be some really interesting additions to this team. First of all, in terms of the returning guys, we have Bryce Hall, who is a guy that I'm sure a lot of Bucs fans kind of forgot about the fact that he was on the team last year because he unfortunately got hurt right out of the gate, week one. But when we think about all season how there ended up being some pretty big issues with cornerback depth after some injuries, it's because this is the guy that you had thought was going to be your number 3 guy. So very excited to see him get another chance here when last season didn't go how he wanted.
Yeah, and in fact, he did win that third outside corner job. And in the very first game, Zion McCollum got a concussion, and Bryce Hall was in. Then, of course, as you mentioned, he suffered a dislocated ankle, a similar injury to Chris Godwin's. And that was it for the year. But he had fulfilled what the Buccaneers expected when they signed him from the Jets in free agency. So it's good to see him get another shot at doing the exact same thing.
Right. And just like we've talked about with Chris Godwin, of seeing how he has gone through a hard injury before, knew how to come back and rehab from it, so we therefore have confidence he knows how to do it again. I feel similarly about Bryce Hall, where, hey, he went through this in college, the same exact injury, but the other leg, still went on to be able to have this career in the NFL. So you hate it for guys to have to go through multiple big injuries, but you also know they do have some experience with it and maybe know how to handle it. So, all right, after Bryce Hall, we have linebacker Anthony Walker. Scott,
I'll take this one.
Great, go for it.
I don't know if you are aware of this, but Anthony Walker played his college football at Northwestern University.
Whenever Scott's
Wonder
this
why
excited
Scott
to
wanted
talk
to
about
take this one.
You know, he has a lot of starting experience. I think that's the number one thing. He started 83 games in different stops, including Cleveland, Miami. I think Indy was the other one. And he's a good coverage linebacker, which I think, apart from Levonte, was something we were missing last year because Servase Dennis went down. And, you know, he was being very emphatic in his press conference. He's like, I've seen different grades out there, PFF, and it's funny to think about these guys actually looking at their PFF grades and going, come on, no way. But he says, watch the film. Passes are not completed deep down the middle over me, and passes are not completed deep down the middle in front of me. And
I like
so
the
I
confidence.
think he's throwing it. He says, go watch the film, so I don't think he's making this up. So,
I like the confidence
yeah,
in
and
that.
anytime you're playing cover 2, Tampa 2. I mean, we don't do that exclusively, of course. Todd Bowles probably doesn't do that as much as a lot of teams. But when you do that, your middle linebacker has to be able to drop down the middle. So
I also got an unsolicited text from someone who knows him from a previous stop of his in the NFL, who, again, unsolicited, just messaged me and was like, you just got a great one.
Good.
That this is a great guy on and off the field, good community work, all that.
Well, what else would you expect?
Yeah, and of course, all of us Northwestern people are just stellar citizens. So I thought that was really exciting to hear that in addition to feeling good about his experience. And of course, also I think about last year, every time there were injuries, it felt like you're not just going to a backup, which is always challenging. It felt like you were going to someone who was green as can be. You were going to someone who hasn't played a lot, doesn't have a lot of experience.
Doesn't mean they won't be good.
Doesn't mean they won't be good. It's a very unknown quantity.
Right.
And so I feel like now with someone like Anthony Walker, whether or not whoever our starting inside linebackers end up being, if he is not your starter, to know that if something happens, you're going to someone with experience has to make Todd Bowles pretty happy on that front. And then, of course, another returning player, we got Sterling Shepard, and at first we weren't sure if we could trust the source that broke it. We weren't sure, but none other than Jason Light broke the news. I love when he does this. I feel like every year he picks one random signing to break himself, which I think is really great. And Sterling Shepard, I mean, just a great person to have back. I think the trust that and relationship he has with Baker going all the way back to their college days is really exciting. And he was a guy who made some big plays on some 3rd and 4th downs when it counted throughout the year. And of course, this hopefully also means we'll get back his Sunday Night Football intro with his daughters. That's the most important part. So that's another addition coming back to this team for some wide receiver depth.
He had some injuries in training camp, and then he started the season on the practice squad. But the notable thing to me is that he then finished the season. It wasn't long before he was up on the active roster, and then it wasn't too long after that, Chris Godwin got hurt, that he essentially became the number 3 receiver. And as he put it, I played a lot of football last year. I played more football last year than I have a long time because his last 3 years, I think, with the Giants were all injury marred. And so I think it was big for him to get through an entire season healthy and see that he could still do it. Because he could have just retired before signing with us last June.
I agree, and I think it was the fact that he knew he wanted to come back and play with Baker, which is
That
great.
helped.
And so it shows yet again for him to want to do that again is a great sign. And then now, as far as another new addition, we have an offensive tackle in Charlie Heck, who just looks so the part. He's a gigantic human with a
6'8".
mustache is absolutely
great
so
mustache.
good.
I'm like, already, just the look. I have faith in this person as an offensive lineman. So, it seems like potentially a swing tackle replacement for, and we're going to get into it after this, of who we've lost in free agency, but it's looking like that might be his role here.
Yeah, it sure sounded like that's what he was prepared for, and he was talking about how you just really have to be ready to play on both sides. And he's another guy, like you were talking about Anthony Walker, you got a guy with experience. He's started 23 games in this league. Last year, I think it was, he got signed off of a practice squad to San Francisco's active roster and 5 days later started. And he started the last 2 games. So I think what that says is teams see him and go, we can trust the floor of what we're getting here.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's not going to put us in a terrible situation.
He's going to know how to handle
So,
this.
and his dad was in the league for like 12 years,
Yeah.
mostly with Chicago and Seattle, Andy Heck. So he's got the genes and the
Got the
know-how.
pedigree.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very true. So related to that, let's discuss a little bit. We wanted to start with all the fun stuff of who we added, but of course we need to also address who we have lost in free agency as well. And so of course, based on that one, we figured we should talk about Justin School. That's sort of looks like the one-to-one replacement there potentially. So Justin School has left to go to the Vikings, and because of some injury stuff there, I think he might get a chance to start at least at the very beginning of the season. So very sad to lose him. Great guy. Did a great job, especially when he was able to step in for Tristan Wirfs later in the year. So we did lose him, but now we already, we're able to say, all right, Charlie Heck is our replacement for him, it's looking like. And then another seems like one-to-one replacement in some ways. KJ Britt went to the Dolphins, and Anthony
Went from the
Walker
Dolphins.
from the Dolphins here. We just were
trade.
like, just swap these 2 guys out over here. And of course, we did also lose Tavier Thomas also to the Vikings, who was a very big person on our special teams.
Probably our best special teamer last year.
He really was. And I think it just felt like every time there was a big splash special teams play,
It was him delivering assist.
it was him. And then, of course, also Joe Tryon-Schwenka has left for the Browns. And, of course, we brought in Haason Reddick. So
yeah.
I'm like, look at them.
We were prepared for these.
They were
Yes.
prepared for these losses, and they brought in someone each time. And so it doesn't feel like any of the losses presented some glaring hole that we haven't filled yet or feel forced to fill in the draft, which we know that seems to always be Jason Light's MO of making sure in free agency we at least fill some holes. That way when you come to the draft, you're not in any kind of desperate place at any one position. So, all right, let's go into the most important part of our show. Everyone's favorite segment except yours, maybe. Or
Oh,
depends
no, I
how
like
you do.
it,
Depends
yeah.
how you do.
So
Stump Scott,
far I got the first 2 right.
Yep.
And then the next 2
you got half right.
partial credit.
Partial credit, yes.
Okay. Like the Simeon one last week when I
But are we doing this pass fail? Are we at like A, B, C,
No,
D?
I think
I
it's a yay
admitted-
or nay.
Yeah, well, at least, like last week, if I'd have just known what age Simeon was when he was drafted, I would have been able to do the
You'd have been good.
math.
You were
and
close.
I picked the wrong number and then the math didn't add up.
But you
That's
knew
true.
all the other fun facts.
So what do we got?
All right, so Bri, would you like to read the question for us here? All right, the question is, which Bucs Pro Bowler played at the University of Nebraska, Omaha in 2010?
I was about to say this is easy because he was just at the
University
University of
of
Nebraska,
Nebraska.
and we drafted Levonte in 12, so he would have been there in 2010, as was Ndamukong Suh. But the University of Nebraska is in Lincoln, so I don't know much about the University of Nebraska Omaha.
Yeah, when I saw this question, I did the same thing, and I was
Yeah.
like, wait, why are they saying there's only one? Because it's Levonte
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
Suh, and then
the
I went,
Omaha,
oh, wait.
Lincoln.
Which, having gone to Mizzou at the time of this moment with Nebraska in our Big 12 division, I should have immediately recognized, so I felt a little bad about that. So Casey was partially stumped because of the Lincoln
Yeah.
versus Omaha part.
I don't know.
You got nothing?
I don't know.
Well, the answer is Shaq Barrett.
Who played at Colorado State?
That he did the whole bounce around. We go here, we go there, and that was one of his stops.
This is
University.
very specific.
It was,
Yeah.
which is how Stump Scott. That's what it
This
takes
has got
to
to be like
stump
a
you.
University of Nebraska Omaha alumni sending in this.
I think that seemed
Alumni.
like a
Probably.
safe because there were more than one question submitted specifically about Nebraska-related football things. So
Nebraska
yes,
Omaha.
specifically yes, but also University of Nebraska that I could tell.
Nebraska, too.
They're the expert at that. So thank you very much for our question. We got to Stump Scott with. It's our favorite thing that happens. And again, please continue to send in
I'm under
questions.
500 now,
Oh no!
Yay.
Hey,
unless you give me partial credit.
we'll think about it. But also, just you're a baseball fan. Think of it that way. You're still batting a great average.
Oh, that's true.
That you're still a
Yeah,
Hall of Famer
yeah,
in
that's
baseball
right. Yep,
category.
600.
So please
I mean,
send
400.
us our future Stump Scott questions. We love it. We appreciate it. So yes, send it to myself or Bri on social media.
Nothing else about
so he
Nebraska
doesn't see
Omaha,
it. No, 1,000 more questions.
They don't even
about
have a
Nebraska,
football
Omaha.
program anymore, do they?
Oh, there you go. You stumped me with that question. I don't know. I got nothing. Well,
Yeah.
that is going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.